So that brings us to this next piece that greatly expands the kind of democracy demands we're making. These demands were published by Howie Hawkins after the 2020 campaign. There's a link down there, howiehawkins.us/democracy-demands, and you can read more into each one of these. But it starts off with a right to vote amendment to the Constitution. Right now, there is not a constitutionally enshrined right to vote. There are bits and pieces that might apply the right here and there, but there is no universal right to vote in our government. And it's why this kind of stuff is legal, right? It's why Republicans can kick people off the ballot or can kick people out of the voter rolls. It's why Democrats can kick parties off the ballot. The fact that it's not constitutionally protected, that it's not enshrined, in the foundation of and again, it's not enshrined because we were never meant to be a democracy. We are an oligarchy by design. So if we want to change that, we need to enshrine it and get a right to vote amendment in the Constitution that guarantees everyone gets to vote. Similarly with revoking felons' right to vote. That's another example of how we're disenfranchising people. We need a nonpartisan election administration. The FEC is appointed by the government. It is Republicans and Democrats. They often have this kind of deal going, right, where they keep it balanced. And then those people, because they're nominated and appointed by the status quo, they protect the status quo. And in 2020, the Federal Election Commission didn't have quorum. The Trump administration did not appoint enough people. So when the Howie Hawkins campaign had questions, they couldn't give us a official answer. They literally were not able to answer in any way that was binding because they didn't have quorum. They didn't have enough members. We just said we need fair ballot access standard. We've talked about proportional representation. I'm actually going to skip this one to come to it at the end, but we need to abolish the Electoral College. We need to elect the president via a national ranked choice popular vote. Recent Republican presidential winners have not won the popular vote. It's been a formula of the Electoral College that has determined, that a minority candidate actually won. We need public financing of elections. We really need to get money out of politics. It's rotting it to its core. And it's rotting an already rotten system. So it's kind of like exponentially making the problem worse. And then the more controversial one at number 5 that I skipped, we need to abolish the U.S. Senate as we know it. The U.S. Senate is an anti-democratic defiance of the theory of one person, one vote. When we give each state 2 representatives, that means that small, often Republican-leaning states get way more power in the U.S. Senate based on populations, whereas large states like California, or even large states like Texas, which, as Garrett said, is not 100% Republican, despite what they would like you to think, they get underpowered because their votes per senator is in the tens of millions, as opposed to Wyoming's votes per senator, which is a few 100,000 for each. And so we really need to abolish the Electoral College. And again, this is something the Democrats could have done, right? This is something they could move on if they actually wanted to move on serious democracy reforms. But they're not interested in serious democracy reforms. They're interested in maintaining a system that will keep them in power and providing whatever veneers they need to maintain its legitimacy with their own base. So we need to do that, but then we need to, like I said, the Senate, the 2 votes, and then if you look at the founding of the Senate, the people didn't originally vote for the Senate, right? The Senate was literally intended to be a blocker against the people having too much influence over those in power and the wealthy and the elites. That was the intention of the Senate, and they said it out loud. Right? When you read it, it's the Senate's intent, its purpose was to make sure the people didn't get too much power over the elites that were already running things. And so, that's probably one of the more controversial things that Howie campaigned on in 2020. It always got a good discussion going. But when you actually think about the Senate and its role, um, it is nothing but a kind of a conservative status quo anchor holding us back, and it needs to be abolished if we want to continue to, just like the House of Lords in England, right, where it's just lifetime appointments based on your on your who your parents are. It's if we want to make claims to be a democracy, if we want to move towards realizing an actual democracy in this country, the Senate cannot remain.
It's to kind of add on that real fast. It's all over the Federalist Papers. If you read like how many of the founders, the oligarchs that founded the country, set up this system, advocated this system, were afraid of genuine democracy, and they put all of these things in there, such as the Senate, specifically to overturn the will of the people. And so, Chris is definitely not exaggerating there. Like, they literally wrote down that was the purpose of it, to not be a democracy. And slowly over time, we've made reforms, such as the senators were not originally elected by the people. They were appointed. An amendment later came to where now we do elect the senators, but it's still an unfair system because of the fact it's not really proportional, right? It overweights certain states over others, which, does go in the face of that idea of one person, one vote, especially for, national issues that affect all of us, not just the people in one state.
And then you throw in the filibuster, right? That you have to have a super majority of 60 to actually pass anything. And then, the Senate just becomes more and more anti-democratic the more you learn about it.